This will be our last. It's 2 questions, and they come from Rome 8180. And so we'll get to this element of it first. This may have to wait because it may require some prep. Rest assured, Rome, I did some though. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the greatest win-win trades of all time and where the Sabonis Haliburton trade will rank if Sacramento wins a series or two. Bonus points for trades that weren't blow it up scenarios. Real Syrup 2219 also says, related to this, last night during the Kings game, I was wondering if teams should worry less about winning the trade and more about making their team better. The Kings are undoubtedly better this year, even if some people think Haliburton is better than Sabonis or Fox, or will be better than Sabonis or Fox. So this is fascinating. I think I would caution that as someone who does a lot of trade reactions, I will say that I think we're too quick to jump on judgments for trades where these things can play out. And I said this in Discord, look at the interpretation of the Kristaps Porzingis trade to Dallas when it first happened versus what it is now. Most people thought the Knicks lost that deal, didn't think they searched hard enough for a high enough asking price. And then it became, the Mavericks really fucked up there. So we need to let these things marinate. And the Sabonis Haliburton trade is one of those specifically, because even if the Kings' goal was getting better now, their ultimate goal was not just, hey, let's win a series. You want to view this over the longer term. If a trade is going to be won in a single year, it's because it would be because the Kings won the title or came out of the West. If they reach an NBA Finals with Sabonis this year in this 1 year, maybe you could even stretch it to conference finals based off their history. That trade is absolutely worth it. What I think makes the trade more debatable now in a good way is that what the Kings are doing feels sustainable. They're not especially old. They're not, their draft asset well is not stripped, even though they owe the 2024 selection to Atlanta. So they have, and they're not in cap hell yet. They can have cap space if they don't want Harrison Barnes this year. They're also going to have access to a non-taxpayer mid-level exception. So they still have plenty of mechanisms that can help them improve their team. Bites at the apple when it comes to the draft or trades. That's why and I panned the trade when it happened. I didn't think Fox and Sabonis were going to be a good fit. I was wrong. So I do think we have to look at trades, all of them really, through a more gradual lens than we do. But I also recognize part of the business model, including what we do on this podcast, is we want to provide those reflexive reactions. I enjoy trying to figure it out and thinking about how player X is going to fit on team Y or with player Z on his new team. I really do enjoy that aspect of this business. But I think what Real Syrup gets at, it is interesting, is that there probably are moves that are not made because you're afraid of looking like a dumbass, or it would be the unpopular move at the time. You have to kind of credit Monty McNair for making what you had to know was going to be a wildly unpopular trade amongst your fans. And it was initially. The Kings fan base is generally very welcoming of new players, and there are a lot of people that came out in defense of it and understood the logic, but they weren't happy about it. So you have to credit Monty McNair, because public perception does factor into how NBA front offices think. I know that for a fact. It does not, a front office stumbling across my fake trades piece. No, that's not going to have any bearing on their thinking. But they weigh that into their decision making. How big, how much of a share does that account for? That's going to depend on the front office. So I do think, to Real CEO's point, that front offices should be a little bit more risk inclined, which is why let's look at, I'm not complimenting them for this, but if the Hawks really did not believe in Luka Doncic and they thought Trae Young was their guy, that's a gutsy trade to make. Now, why didn't the Kings get the same treatment of, well, hey, they drafted Marvin Bagley instead of Luka Doncic? That takes guts. And that went against prevailing consensus. It's not always going to work out. Sometimes you're going to get burned by it, but you can't. And by the way, Luka Doncic would have been the safer pick. I think their whole stigma against European players that they can cost you your job and you're going to look back and say, oh, you never should have taken them. No, he was kind of like a no-brainer at the time to me. That would have been the safer pick. You could justify that easier than the Marvin Bagley pick. And that was not this Kings front office. I know that. I understand that. And part of the reason that wasn't this Kings front office is because that pick was made in the first place. Anyway, so I agree that teams need to be more risk inclined. And I also think, though, that we need to understand what a team's goals might be. Because as Real Syrup saying, you need to focus on making your team better. What does that mean? Because I'm not going to tell anyone how to fan as an NBA fanatic. And I'm not going to tell I tell franchises all the time how they should build their team. I'm someone who is a big believer in aiming for the middle, even the top of the middle long-term without a clear path upward. it's not sexy to me. It doesn't do it for me. And so you need the clear path to contention. And so if you're making a trade just to get better and be more competitive, uh, there needs to be a path forward. And part of my problem with the Kings was I didn't see that path forward even if this worked out. I do now, based off some of the things I've outlined in this podcast. So I'm wrong all the time. This is just one of those instances. This is also a trade we'll have to reevaluate more again in the future. I'll be fascinated to see where it lands 3-5 years down the line. But one playoff berth, unless it's I'll go Western Conference Finals appearance, that doesn't absolve the Kings of, we don't even have to think about what happens next. Like this trade was a home run. But yes, as of right now, it looks like a win-win because we need to factor in the franchise's goals. The Kings' goal, or at least I'm going to assign this goal to them, was that it should have been, we want to get better now while still maintaining our clear path, or even simplifying, streamlining, improving our path to the level above where we're going to be now. They have done that. I firmly believe that with Sabonis, unless they think he's going to leave in free agency, which I don't think he will. And then the Pacers, they wanted to begin anew. They wanted to go through the more gradual rebuilding approach that the Kings were no longer interested in. So that trade, of course, is a win for them, even though they don't, Tyrese Haliburton misses a ton of time. They're going to have another top lottery pick this year. Like that is their end game. Because they didn't make the play, and that doesn't make this a failure at all. And I've seen like jokes being dragged about Tyrese Haliburton getting named an all-star. He was absolutely an all-star. He would have been an all-NBA player probably if he played in more games. So that's an example of a win-win, is because it fixed both teams' aims. And as I was going through this, and I think a more recent win-win, Rome said bonus points are not blow-up scenarios. The Cavs-Jazz trade for Donovan Mitchell, yes, that was a blow-up scenario for the Jazz, but look how good they ended. Like Larry Markkinen made an all-star team. He might make an all-NBA team. And so I think that certainly falls under the umbrella. So some of the ones that stood out, and this is tough. I'm sure I didn't go through all of them, but that trade between the Knicks and Bulls, what year was it? It was sometime it was 88, I think. The Bulls traded the Knicks traded Bill Cartwright, an 88 first round pick and an 88 third round pick to Chicago for Charles Oakley, an 88 first round pick and an 88 third round pick. Like that's just a very interesting swap. And saying third round just feels really fucking weird. I think that ended up working out for both teams. So that would be one that stands out to me. This one is super interesting, and hat tip Greg Schwartz of Bleacher Report for it. The Phoenix Suns traded Charles Barkley and a 1999 second round pick to the Houston Rockets for Sam Cassell, Robert Horry, Chucky Brown, and Mark Bryant. Barkley was past his prime at the time, but he still went on to have like great value when he ended up in Houston. He averaged 16 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1 steal over the 4 years in Houston, made an all-star team in 97, helped the Rockets get to 3 playoff appearances. And then Phoenix, though, ended up moving Cassell with Michael Finley to the Dallas Mavericks for Jason Kidd. And that ended up being huge for Phoenix, having Kidd there. So I would strike that as a win-win. Fantastic find to me by Greg Schwartz. I'm wondering if Lakers fans might push back against this one, but we can get into the nitty-gritty details of it. But Memphis trading Powell and in 2010 what was it, 2008? Was that year? Yeah, trading Powell in 2008 to the Lakers for the pick that became Marc Gasol. And I don't know if you would look at it differently, because that wasn't like the draft rights to Marc Gasol were not considered the meat and potatoes of that deal. You look at the 2008 first round pick was in there and a 2010 first round pick, but like he ended up with Marc Gasol still. And so I would call that a win-win. He ended up being a part of the most successful era in Memphis Grizzlies history to date. You don't win a title, the Lakers win 2 with Powell. Still, like I would classify that as a win-win. Another one that stands out, when the Lakers traded Shaq to Miami for Lamar Odom, Caron Butler, Brian Grant, and then the 2006 first round pick and the 2007 second round pick. I guess you could say Kobe and O'Neal wanting to stick together. How many titles would they won? Lamar ended up being one of the most versatile players in the NBA for the Lakers and was just absolutely monstrous for them. And if that relationship was going to continue deteriorating anyway, to get out of that situation with Lamar Odom, Caron Butler, Brian Grant, a first round pick, I thought that was really good value. And Odom ends up he was with the Lakers for 7 years, was just instrumental when you look at his versatility. And Caron Butler had the good one season in LA. And here's the other thing. Both of these teams ended up winning titles with members of the trade on their team after this trade. And so I think that just automatically counts as a win-win. I'm trying to think if there's any more recent, and this one I'm curious what people think about. I have the Pacers trading Paul George to OKC for Victor Oladipo and Sabonis. Because then Sabonis, look at what Victor Oladipo gave you. He became an all-NBA player for a minute, and we know injuries just sapped him of all value after that, but he became an all-NBA player for a minute. Then you have Sabonis, who helps keep you afloat, becomes your best player, and then you're able to use him to really jumpstart this rebuild with Tyrese Haliburton, where your future just looks so bright now between him and Turner and Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard, a ton of cap space, extra first-round picks, whoever you draft this year. So you're able to skip the rebuild, but then able to jumpstart when that didn't really bring you to a title level. And then OKC, I mean, gave them a ton of credit for trading for Paul George when it wasn't guaranteed he would stay. You got to keep him, and then you were able to trade him for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and all the picks, because I don't remember who initially said this, but it's the best way I've ever heard of trading. Sam Presti found a way to trade Paul George and Kawhi Leonard while only having one of them on his roster. So I think that goes down as win-win. I don't know if that's controversial. And another one I've seen people think about is the Anthony Davis trade for New Orleans and the Lakers. The Lakers won a title, so you do that again. The Pelicans end up with Brandon Ingram, and that's, I guess you can count that as a blow-up scenario for New Orleans. They just got so much value out of that. You use Hart, he ends up getting you CJ McCollum. You didn't end up selling very high on Lonzo Ball, but he goes through those injuries. I don't know if I would throw that under, but that was one I kind of thought about, just because you got so much value and you're still going to reap the benefits of that value. And technically those will be instrumental tools in, okay, like that's the reason you have Dyson Daniels. So I think it's fair to call it a win-win. Probably need to see more from the Pelicans though, in terms of their core staying healthy before we go that route. I think I'm kind of out of suggestions there. I mean, you could get into, was the Kevin Love trade between the Cavs and the Timberwolves, did that end up being win-win in the long run? But steering clear of blow-up scenarios, which that clearly was for Minnesota. If anyone hasn't any others, I'm sure there's others. Those are just the ones that sort of sprang to mind for me after digging around the NBA transaction vortex.